Hello Internet, welcome to my bedroom. I was on Facebook the other day and I came across this video in my news feed that was called The Truth on Transgenderism. So I thought, okay, I bite, let's have a look and see what this has to say. Basically what it was a Christian preacher saying why he thinks being trans is wrong, and it had thousands of views, loads of shares, loads of comments, loads of likes, and I just thought it was rubbish. I don't want to brag, but I do have a degree in theology from one of the best universities in the world in the subject, and I do have published academic work in the field of sexuality and Christianity. So I'd like to make a few videos where I give my own critique on some of the anti-LGBT horseshit that passes for Christianity I see on the internet. And I'm going to start with the video I mentioned, which is by the Calvinist pastor, John McArthur. So grab yourself a cup of tea, settle down, and let's see what this man has to say.
Hello, I'm Claire, and my question is,
Hi, Claire.
In regards to transgender. I have an older sibling actually who's transgender, and my question is just how to approach that biblically, specifically in regards to what pronouns to use, and just in general.
Okay, so I'm going to stop here. Claire's actually asked a slightly tough question, in the sense that the Bible never directly addresses the issue of being transgender. Now, that's quite normal. The Bible doesn't address a whole bunch of things, and that's a job of a priest, a pastor, or a theologian, is to look at Christian tradition, look at scripture, look at patristics, and try and figure out what the most Christian response to the situation is. So let's see what John MacArthur thinks that is, and how he justifies that biblically, because after all, that is Claire's question.
Yeah, Claire, bless your heart for asking that. Simply stated, there is no such thing as transgender. You're either XX or XY. That's it. God made man male and female. That is determined genetically, that is physiology, that is science, that is reality.
Okay, so that was horrible. I would like to break down this bit specifically from what he just said.
God made man male and female. That is determined genetically, that is physiology, that is science, that is reality.
That is not science, and let me tell you why. If you read the creation story in the book of Genesis, yes, God does create two biological sexes, but biological sex and gender are actually not the same thing. Gender is a cultural construct. Now, an example of that, let's look at the male gender. In some cultures, it's appropriate for an individual of the male gender to wear a skirt. And in others, it's inappropriate. In some cultures, it's appropriate for someone of the male gender to wear makeup. In others, it's so inappropriate, you could get beaten up in the street or killed for doing so. And all of that has nothing to do with your biological sex. So I think, straight off the bat, you kind of have to throw away this idea that gender is created by God at the dawn of creation, because it changes from culture to culture, and even within the same culture across time. So, yeah. Secondly, even by the Bible's own definitions of masculine and feminine, so many characters break the rules. Jacob, the founder of Israel, is portrayed as a distinctly feminine character. The beautiful and young David, who has a male lover, is another person who breaks gender norms. Deborah, the judge, takes a very distinctly masculine role. The female evangelists in the New Testament. Each of these characters actually diverge wildly from what their culture expects of them when it comes to gender. But in every case, it's kind of an essential part of what makes these individuals great followers of God or Christians. So, to summarize, your gender isn't determined by your biological sex, and strictly adhering to what your culture expects of your gender is not an essential part of being a Christian. So from a scientific perspective and a biblical perspective, what John has just said here is kind of bullshit.
And as more than anything, in fact, I was reading an article by R.C. Sproul just yesterday in which he said that the greatest revolution in American history was neither the American Revolution or the Industrial Revolution. It is the sexual revolution. This has become the most far-reaching, damaging of all revolutions that's ever occurred in this country or any other.
We're talking about gender identity here, John. We're not talking about having sex, so maybe we should stay on topic.
I've said this a few weeks ago, a person who is in the transgender world is 19 times more likely to kill himself or herself, because you have completely cut yourself off from reality and from normal relationships. This is the end of your identity. This is the end of your ability to have a marriage that is a real marriage. It's the end of your ability to have a family. It's the end of your ability to connect and to be a part of a society and a culture and have a future and belong. It is a kind of extreme isolation that can be no more extreme. You can't get more extreme than saying, I am not who I actually am.
John is using trans suicide rates as a reason to persecute and be intolerant towards the transgender community, which I find mind-blowing. Trans people die every day, and so many of them because of suicide, because they live in a world that doesn't accept them. So let's create a world that is even more intolerant towards them. I find that just so mind-boggling. I'd also just like to take this point to highlight that Claire asked for a biblical response to her sibling being transgender. And so far, John has not referenced the Bible, maybe only once in passing, a passing reference to creation. So
I don't mean by being so firm that you want to be lacking in love when you communicate this.
I have found so frequently that Christian fundamentalists will say something extremely bigoted and close-minded, and then they'll say they love the person to make themselves feel better. And I'd like to say to anyone who does that, stop lying to yourself.
This is a war on God. I'm not going to let God tell me who I am. I'm not going to let God define me. I'm going to be my own God. I'm going to define myself.
Trans people think that they are their own God. Has to be one of the funniest things I've ever heard. When I hear statements like that, I really start to think about the mental well-being of the person involved. Either they know that they're lying and grossly exaggerating the situation, or they genuinely believe that and they're kind of actually delusional and have some problem with their mental health.
I think this has to be dealt with love and compassion, because there's a lack of being loved and accepted and feeling wanted and needed and significant.
You think?
So on the one hand, the reality of that lie and deception is so damaging, so destructive, so isolating, so corrupting that it needs to be confronted. But on the other hand, that confrontation can't exaggerate what already exists, which is a sense of feeling isolated in relationships. So you've got to find the fine line between confronting the error of it to protect the person and at the same time providing the love and affirmation that that person needs to be all that God would have that person be. Does that help?
So that was awful. My final response, I'd actually like to give a response to Claire's question. Claire, I'm sorry John didn't listen to your question and he didn't give you a biblical response to coming to terms with your sibling being transgender. Time and time again, when you look at the life of Jesus Christ, he comes across people who are trapped and in a difficult situation. Often they're being crushed under the weight of societal expectations and other people's judgment, whether they're sex workers, whether they're poor, whether they have health problems. Christ comes into their life, and every time he smashes the social stigma that makes their life so terrible. It's written in Galatians 3:28, "There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Jesus Christ." From the Old Testament to the New, so many great individuals have bent the rules of society and broken the rules of gender. And that really leads me to believe that in God's kingdom, gender is a rainbow. It's not a binary. I say to you, Claire, there's nothing in the Bible that says you shouldn't accept your sibling for who they are. You should love them and give them the support they need. Listen to Christ. Don't listen to this asshole.